Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're embarking on a really profound journey. We're looking into the roots of human grief, specifically some ancient mourning customs that might actually reshape how you think about loss.
hmm
Our mission today is to unpack a particular set of practices, the ancient customs of, well, cutting the body and shearing hair as tokens of mourning. And we're diving straight into Sir James George Fraser's huge work, Folklore in the Old Testament. We're focusing on part 4, chapter 4, which is all about cuttings for the dead.
Yes, and what's so remarkable about Fraser's approach is just how thorough he is.
Yeah.
He pulls evidence from, so many diverse cultures across huge spans of time, and he shows these patterns in human behavior that, they really transcend time and geography. Practices you might think are unique. Turns out they echo across the globe, which of course raises some big questions about where they came from and what they actually meant.
So, what can this incredible material teach us about ancient traditions, about grief itself? Let's get into it.
Okay, so we start where Fraser starts. Ancient Israel. He gives this really vivid picture, doesn't he? Mourners cutting themselves, shaving patches of hair.
He does. Jeremiah, for example, he talks about times of great calamity where people died without the usual lamentations, no cutting, no making themselves bald. It was a sign of utter desolation. He even describes these 80 men from Shechem, Shiloh, and Samaria, coming with shaven beards, torn clothes, and actual self-inflicted cuttings, bringing offerings after the Babylonian conquest, a clear sign of sorrow.
And it wasn't only Jeremiah, right? Earlier prophets mention it too.
Exactly. Amos, Isaiah, Micah, they all talk about baldness as a pretty standard token of grief.
hmm
Micah specifically tells people to make thee bald, enlarge thy baldness as the eagle.
But Fraser has a point about that eagle comparison, doesn't he?
He does, and it's a fascinating detail. He argues the comparison isn't really with an eagle, but with the griffin vulture, which, naturally has a bald head and neck. Okay, so that makes the imagery much more specific. It shows what kind of baldness they were talking about.
Precisely. And even later in exile, Ezekiel still refers to baldness and sackcloth together as signs of horror, of shame.
Right, so clearly established in Israelite tradition. But as you mentioned, these practices weren't unique to them.
Not at all. Fraser shows they were common among neighboring peoples too. Jeremiah mentions Gaza becoming bald, and speaking of Moab, he says, "Every head is bald, and every beard clipped upon all the hands are cuttings."
Isaiah says something similar about Moab, too, I recall.
Yes, lamentation with baldness, cut beards. So it really makes you ask, if this was so widespread, how did Israel's view on it change? Because it did change.
It definitely did. It's quite a shift, isn't it? From being widely practiced to being seen as barbarous and heathenish, as Fraser puts it, and then explicitly forbidden.
That's the key transition. The prohibition starts showing up in the legal codes, sort of near the end of the Jewish monarchy, and then more strongly during or after the Babylonian exile. The Deuteronomic Code, for instance, which scholars date around 621 BC, it's very direct. "Ye are the children of the Lord your God. You shall not cut yourselves nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead.
And the reason given is,
For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God." So the rationale is explicitly tied to Israel's unique status, setting them apart from, surrounding pagan nations.
so Fraser sees it partly as a kind of growing refinement, maybe people becoming uncomfortable with these extreme displays, but framed religiously.
Exactly. He suggests there might have been this growing refinement of sentiment, but the reformers packaged it in religious terms. Because, in that worldview, the ultimate authority, the ultimate reason for doing or not doing something was divine command, fear of God.
Makes sense. And the Levitical code reinforces this.
It does, very clearly. Probably composed during or after the exile. It says, "Ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord." Just flat out forbidden.
But Fraser also notes a sort of subtlety, a recognition that these were deeply ingrained habits.
Yes, there's a hint of that. The law insists that at least the priests shall absolutely renounce it. Which kind of implies, maybe it's going to be hard to get everyone to stop doing something they've done for generations.
And were the prohibitions actually effective long term?
Well, Fraser points out that centuries later, Jerome was writing that some Jews still practiced cuttings and made bald spots for mourning. So these traditions clearly had staying power, even against official religious law.
That's fascinating. So within Israel, there's this whole story of practice, prohibition, and persistence. But then Fraser just throws the doors wide open, right? He shows us this isn't just a Near Eastern thing.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the scope becomes truly global and, frankly, quite staggering. He shows how universal these customs of cropping hair and cutting the body really were.
Where else do we see it?
Well, right nearby, ancient Arabs had similar rites. Women scratching faces, beating themselves, cutting hair to put on graves. Frazer notes it continued among modern Arabs in Moab. Then you look at ancient Greece. Women cutting hair, scratching cheeks and necks until they bled. Men, too, shearing their hair. Homer describes Achilles and his warriors covering Patroclus' body with their shorn hair.
And like in Israel, there were attempts to stop it.
Yes, Solon's laws in Athens forbade self-scarification. And in Rome, one of the laws of the 12 Tables also banned women from lacerating their cheeks. Varro, the Roman scholar, even thought it might be a blood offering to the dead.
Wow. Okay, so Greece and Rome, too. Where else?
Further afield, the Scythians. Their mourning rituals were incredibly intense, cropping hair, cutting arms, foreheads, noses, ears, even piercing their hands with arrows.
Goodness.
And the Huns, remember Attila, mourned, supposedly, not with womanish lamentations, but with the blood of men. Gashed faces, cropped hair. You find similar things: lacerations, hair tearing, self-flagellation among Slavs, Caucasians.
What about Africa? Frazer mentions it's maybe less common there.
Comparatively rarer, yes, but still present.
Huh.
Abyssinians shearing hair, scratching temples, some Kafir widows lacerating themselves with sharp stones.
Okay, let's cross the Atlantic. North America seems like a rich source for Frazer.
Extremely rich. You have the Tena making incisions, the Nistano piercing thighs and arms with arrows or knives, the Kigani slashing themselves, sometimes singeing their hair right on the funeral pyre.
The physical intensity is just hard to grasp.
It really is. Flatheads cutting off pieces of their own flesh. Chinooks had this specific gruesome technique of running a knife through stretched skin to leave these permanent gashes. Californian Indians wounding their heads with stones. Some even reportedly ate burning flesh from the pyre.
Eating flesh.
Apparently. And throwing hair on the pyre was common too. The Snake Indians believed the physical pain from cuts allowed the mental grief to escape.
Like lancing a wound, almost.
Exactly. That's the rationale given by the Sacs and Foxes too. Cuts give grief a vent. The Dakotas, or Sioux, also saw it as relieving mental pain through physical pain.
And the Plains tribes.
Yeah.
Comanches.
Oh, yes. Killing horses, burning property, and just extensive gashes on arms, legs, bodies, cropping their own hair, cutting the manes and tails of horses. The Arapahoes gashed limbs, cut hair. Apparently, the more love, the more hair cut, and buried locks with the body.
South America, too.
Yep. Patagonians pricking arms with thorns, Fuegians lacerating faces with shells, cutting hair.
Asia, Oceania, it just keeps going.
It does. Old Turks cutting faces so blood mingled with tears. Orang Sakai in Sumatra letting blood drip from head wounds onto the corpse's face. Roro tribes in New Guinea cutting skulls, faces, bodies until blood flowed freely.
And the hair offering comes up again.
Frequently. Galelaries of Halmahera offered hair to the soul 3 days after death. They believed you had to offer hair and purify yourself, or the ghost would haunt you, maybe even thwart your hunting or fishing.
In Polynesia, Frazer seems particularly struck by the practices there.
He describes them with real intensity. In Tahiti, women using shark's teeth to cut their heads, collecting the blood for the beer. Tears and hair also offered, believed to please the hovering soul. They had specific instruments for this.
Shark's teeth.
Yes. And sometimes these mourning rituals at a king's death could escalate into actual fights. Frazer speculates this might even be linked to the origin of gladiatorial combat replacing human sacrifices at tombs.
That's a huge leap. What about Hawaii?
Knocking out teeth eyes sometimes, pulling hair, burning and cutting flesh. Teeth knocking was apparently so common it led to speech problems for many.
Unbelievable.
Tongans beat their teeth, burned scars onto themselves, struck their heads with shark's teeth, thrust spears through limbs, sides, even cheeks. William Mariner's account of mourning for Chief Finau is incredibly graphic, self-wounding, with clubs, stones, knives, head shaving, burning cheeks, extreme displays.
So it's pain, blood, hair, across the board.
Pretty much. Samoans practiced an offering of blood. Maoris of New Zealand used shells or obsidian to cut faces and foreheads until blood flowed and clotted. Hair always cut. Women's breasts woefully gashed.
And then Australia. Frazer says the customs there were practiced with greater severity.
That seems to be the case. Widowers lacerating foreheads, burning waists, widows cutting hair, burning thighs, parents beating their own heads with tomahawks, burning chests and bellies with fire sticks, rubbing ashes in the wounds.
It's just brutal self-infliction.
Absolutely. Gashing with stones, scoring backs with hot brands, the Kamilaroi plastering heads with white clay, then cutting them with axes so blood flowed over the clay. Some Queensland tribes, the women were reportedly gashed from head to foot. The Arunta had specific rules. A man had to cut his shoulder for his father-in-law to appease the ghost, leaving permanent scars.
It's an overwhelming catalog of practices. So after laying all this out, the huge question is, why? What did Frazer think was the meaning behind all this?
Right, that's the core question. He explores a few possibilities. One early idea, maybe drawing from groups like the Nicobarese who shaved their heads to disguise themselves from ghosts, was deception.
Disguise. So change your appearance so the ghost doesn't recognize you or finds you repulsive and leaves you alone.
That's the theory. But Frazer finds it, well, not fully convincing when you look at the whole picture.
Why not? Where does it fall short?
While fear of the ghost is definitely there, you see it in Australia, like the Arunta man cutting himself for his father-in-law, or widows covering themselves in ashes so the ghost won't kill them. The intent doesn't really seem to be disguise. In fact, many of these customs, especially in Australia, seem designed to make the mourners more noticeable, not less. Think of the white clay and blood.
Okay, so not hiding. The goal is maybe the opposite, to be seen mourning.
Exactly. It looks much more like an effort to satisfy the ghost, to show that its loss is being properly, deeply felt. And the way mourners apply their blood directly to the corpse or grave, or leave hair on the body.
That points towards an offering.
Strongly suggests that, yes, a tribute to the spirit, either to, keep it happy, gratify its needs, or maybe to ward off its anger. This leans towards what we call propitiation of the dead, maybe even a basic form of ancestor worship.
But what good is blood and hair to a ghost? I mean, practically speaking.
That's what Frazer wonders, too. The Tahitians might say it's about showing affection, but Frazer suspects the original idea was probably more tangible, more material. Robertson Smith had this idea of a blood covenant. Sharing blood creates a bond, confirms friendly relations between the living and the dead. He pointed to those Australian tribes who didn't just offer blood, but sometimes took bits of the corpse's flesh.
The flesh-eating thing again.
Yes, drying it, distributing it, some even sucking it for strength. And wearing the deceased's hair, like the carrier did, could suggest some kind of exchange.
So a pact sealed in blood and flesh, is that Frazer's final answer?
He finds the evidence for a truly mutual exchange, benefits going both ways a bit thin. Most practices look like the living giving something to the dead, without a clear return expected. So he lands on a simpler, maybe more compelling idea for the blood offering. It's meant to feed and strengthen the ghost.
Feed it, like literally.
Perhaps he draws parallels. Look at how some Australian tribes give blood from their own veins to revive the sick or weak among the living. Or think of Homer Ulysses sacrificing sheep so the weak, fluttering ghosts in the underworld could drink the blood and gain enough substance to speak. If living people need blood and ghosts are weak, maybe the idea was that the disembodied soul needs blood for sustenance too.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It connects the physical act to a perceived need of the spirit. And the hair, how does that fit?
Well, if blood provides refreshment, maybe hair provides strength. Frazer brings up the widespread ancient belief that a person's strength, their life force, resides in their hair. Think of Samson.
Ah, okay. So cutting your hair isn't just symbolic.
It might have been seen as literally transferring a portion of your own vital energy to the ghost, offering strength, just like the blood offered sustenance. This would explain why these two customs, cutting the body and shearing hair, appear together so often, almost in parallel.
So blood for sustenance, hair for strength, both given to the departed spirit. What does this ultimately tell us then? What's the big takeaway?
Well, Frazer concludes that this huge body of evidence strongly suggests these customs were originally about benefiting the spirit of the dead. Wherever you see them, it points to a belief in the soul's survival after death, and, crucially, a desire to stay on good terms with that soul. Fundamentally, these are acts of propitiation, maybe even worship, directed towards the dead.
And bringing it back to ancient Israel, since the Hebrews clearly practiced these things for a long time, Frazer sees them as part of this wider pattern.
Yes, he includes them among the many, many peoples who at some stage practiced a form of ancestor worship, which he argues might be one of the most widespread and influential forms of primitive religion globally.
And this connection to ancestor worship might be why the later reformers in Israel were so keen to ban these practices.
Very possibly. Frazer suggests that this link was likely still understood near the end of the monarchy. So for reformers trying to purify Israelite religion and distinguish it from its neighbors, these mourning rites would have seemed explicitly heathenish, tied directly to the worship of ancestors, rather than Yahweh alone. That gave them a powerful religious motive to prohibit them.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? how our own ways of mourning today, even if they look completely different, might still tap into that same ancient human need, that need to connect with, to honor, maybe even in some subconscious way appease those who've passed on. What traditions do you follow, and what deep-seated beliefs might lie beneath them? Something to ponder.
Thank you for joining us on this really quite intense deep dive. We look forward to exploring more with you next time.